Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning. Thank you all again for joining today's webinar. My name is Anna Shih. I'm a Senior Policy Associate at the Bay Area Council, where I work on issues related to water, climate resilience, and homelessness. I'll be co-moderating the discussion today with Bill Sloan from Venable LLP. Bill has long been an active member of the Council's Water and Climate Resilience Committee, and Venable has generously hosted many of our committee meetings back when we had them in person. We're hoping we can get back together in person soon. So Bill, I'll hand it over to you to introduce yourself and say a few opening comments on California's drought.
Okay, thank you, Anna, and thank you everybody for joining. I'm a partner in the environmental group here in Venable, and I've been practicing for over 20 years on all of the legal issues involved with water resources and natural resource management. I was getting ready this morning, and I was talking to my 4-year-old daughter, and she said, "What are you going to be doing today, Dad?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to talk to some very smart people about what happens if we turn on the tap and no water comes out, or what happens if we go to flush our toilets and sadly nothing takes it down the drain." And she said to me, "Well, Dad, that's boring. Why don't you talk about unicorns and rainbows?" And I said, "Well, I'm sure that would be a much more uplifting subject, but unfortunately that's not on the agenda today." And I guess not to sort of take us down that dark path too far, but it's not difficult to say that things are not good right now. The official United States drought monitor has the state of California, 88% of the state in an extreme drought, designated in an extreme drought. And just to kind of put that into perspective, the drought monitor characterizes that as circumstances where there will be little pasture remaining for livestock. Producers will begin irrigating in the winter time. The fire season will last year-round. Fires will start occurring in typically wet parts of the state. Water is viewed as inadequate for all the competing demands: agriculture, wildlife, and urban needs. I'm sure we're going to hear more about this today. The reservoirs are extremely low, and even hydropower will be restricted. So that's an extreme drought. That's sort of level 4 of 5, and sadly, almost 45% of the state is now in what is characterized as an exceptional drought. So when we get to those circumstances, fields are fallowed, orchards are removed, the vegetable yields go down, fires become very expensive, fish rescue and relocation begins, pine beetle infestation occurs, algae blooms appear, forest mortality is high, wetlands dry up, and on and on and on. It is not a happy story, but today we're going to talk to a panel of really talented folks who are on the front line of the crisis here in the Bay Area. I'm very much looking forward to it, and hopefully we will hear about a few unicorns and rainbows, even in the mix of some of these more difficult subjects. So I'll pass it back to you, Anna, and let me know when we should kick off with Mike.
Thanks, Bill. And despite the doom and gloom, we are excited to be having this conversation today. For those of you watching, this is the first in a series of water-related webinars co-moderated by the Bay Area Council and Venable LLP. So like Bill mentioned, we'll be spending the next hour with representatives of the Bay Area's 4 largest water agencies to discuss the drought, the current state of Bay Area water supplies, and what's in store for the region if we have another dry year or 2 or 3 or 4. So we'll spend about 10 minutes with each guest, then open up the discussion for questions from audience members. So as you're listening, please feel free to write your questions in the Q&A box, and we will get to as many as we can. So with that, Bill, I'll hand it over to you to introduce our first speaker.
Okay, all right. Well, our first guest is Mike Tognolini. Mike is the director of Water and Natural Resources at East Bay Municipal Utility District, East Bay MUD. He has been responsible for long-range water supply planning and the development of new sources such as groundwater storage, water transfers, desalination, water recycling, and the expansion of recycled water projects in areas like San Ramon, Oakland, and Emeryville. So welcome, Mike. Thank you for joining us today. And you have a beautiful picture in the background. I hope that's a current picture. I'm not holding my breath, but Mike, would you start off by just describing your service area and the population that you serve, just to kind of give us context on the challenges that your district faces?
Hi, Bill. Good morning. Thank you for the introduction. And yes, the background photo for here is Pardee Reservoir. That's East Bay Mud's primary source of drinking water, and it is a relatively current picture. It was taken this summer, so it's a dry area. It's taken this summer, and anyway, that's what you're looking at behind me. East Bay Mud serves 1.4 million customers in the East Bay, and that's in both Alameda and Contra Costa counties. That's our water service system. We also serve wastewater to a smaller service area around Oakland, San Leandro, and Berkeley. But our water system includes service to Oakland, Berkeley, Richmond, out to Crockett. It includes Walnut Creek, San Ramon, La Marinda area, as well as San Leandro, Alameda, Castro Valley, down as far as Hayward. And that's the 1.4 million people that we serve within our service area.
Okay, all right. Well, and I imagine many of the folks on this webinar today are in your service area. And I know that East Bay Mud is certainly, like many of the folks here today, reliant on the Sierra snowpack, which had a very rough spring. How is your supply outlook at the moment? Could you give us sort of an overview of where we are right now?
Sure. So East Bay Mud's, as I said, primary water supply is Pardee Reservoir, which is on the McElemy River. It is fed by Sierra snowmelt, and that system provides water by gravity to the East Bay. So during when there's plenty of water, we don't have to pump that water to the East Bay. It comes by gravity. In terms of this year, we've really seen a historically dry season. It's the second driest year in terms of precipitation on record on the McElemy River, and those records go back 90 years. So the only year that was drier was 1977. So we have seen very dry conditions this past year. Fortunately, we did have decent storage coming into the year. So the result is that our board declared a stage 1 drought in April, and that's where we currently stand. That represents our drought stages go from 0 being no drought to 4 being the most extreme drought, and we're at stage 1. So we're at a level now where our storage is down. We're activating our supplemental water supplies and asking for 10% voluntary conservation from our customers. We're at where we expect to be in the first year of a drought.
Okay, all right. Well, and I think probably a question on many people's minds is, okay, that's how we're handling the sort of extremely dry year we're facing this year. What happens if we look, say, 2 years into the future and we're still confronting these kinds of conditions? We'd love to think it'll just be a 1-year phenomenon, but if it does continue, what does that look like for your district?
Well, so that's what we plan for. So and we route something that's on our mind all the time. It's something we spend decades developing water supply projects and implementing conservation programs. And when we try to figure out how much water we might need for a future drought, what we plan for is an extreme drought that's beyond anything we've had in the past. And so in our case, we look at the worst drought in our history, which was the 1976-77 drought for the McElemy River, and then we add a year. Okay, what if there's one more year that's just as bad? So that's the drought we plan for, a 3-year extreme drought scenario. So to your question, Bill, if we have 2 more very dry years like we had in 2021, we'll be able to make it through. We will be looking at very heavy conservation levels. we'll be looking at bringing in supplemental water supplies where we can and draining our storage by the end of 3 years. So we will be in a high level of emergency, but it's something we're planning for and something that we're ready to address.
That's yeah, that we obviously all have our fingers crossed we don't confront that, but in the event we do, can you give us a little more of a vision of what the district is doing to make the supply more drought resilient? What are sort of the long-term project planning things in the works at your district?
Sure. So, and as I said, it's something we've been planning for many years. And when we look at how to reduce risk in our water supply when it comes to drought, there are several things we do. One thing that we do is try to look at ways we can reduce our customer usage, our customer demand. And we do that with an active and aggressive water conservation program. And our customers have met the call every time we've asked for, improved water use efficiency, or during a dry year where we ask for actual reductions in use. In both cases, our customers have stepped up and heeded that call. In addition to customer conservation, we have a water recycling program. Another way we can reduce our customer demand by developing new sources of supply from what we already have available. So we use recycled water for irrigation. We use recycled water for industrial uses. It helps us offset how much more water we have to bring in. So that's a second tool that we use. And the third thing I would say is that important for us in managing our water supply risk is to diversify the sources of water that we have available. I mentioned our gravity system that we have from the McElemy River and Pardee Reservoir. We have since developed a new connection that was completed in 2011 that allows us to access water from the Sacramento River. So we have another watershed that we can turn to in the event that the McElemy has a particularly dry year. But what if the whole system is dry? What else can we do? Well, we're adding storage components. We're evaluating groundwater storage as a long-term solution. We're working with most of our Bay Area partners on the potential to enlarge Los Vaqueros Reservoir, and I'm sure Lucinda will talk a little bit more about that, and being a partner in developing storage as a tool to take water in wet years and make it available to us in the drier years. All those are part of the equation. We have many different ways that we can diversify our supplies, but those are some of the highlights of where we're focused right now.
Great, and I know that you entered into a purchase agreement with Sacramento water users to obtain additional water during dry years, and I can only imagine that that several of your fellow folks here are elbowing each other at times to figure out how to access what available water there is. What have you seen in terms of the sort of availability of water for purchase just over, say the past year or so? Are you seeing things just dramatically change?
Yeah, the water market itself is tight, and of course you have to be able to access it. It's not something that you can get to unless you have the plumbing in place to make it work. So fortunately, because we have now this diversion available on the Sacramento River, we now have access to a number of other water sources where there may be entities that are selling water. So in the last drought, in the 2014-2015 drought, we did access water supplies from, first of all, from a federal contract that we have available with the Central Valley Project, but then also from water users in the Sacramento Valley and in the Sacramento River watershed that, for one reason or another, had water available to sell. There aren't a lot of them. So there's a high, it's very competitive, and there's a high demand and not a lot of supply. So, prices spike up, of course, in the dry years, but there are water transfers, we call them water transfers, available in drought. We've used them in the past, and we're looking to use them again. We're not going to rely on them this year, but we're planning for relying on them next year as well.
Okay, and I think maybe the last question I have for you right now is really one sort of on behalf of all of our participants here, which is What message would you convey to the businesses and customers in your service area, given these extraordinary circumstances we're facing? I know you mentioned the stage 1 drought declaration, but in the event those numbers go up, and what message would you convey to folks now so that they too can be planning for the possibilities in the future?
Yeah, I think the first message to get across is to look for ways to implement water use efficiency in your businesses, whatever business that may be. If you can find ways to use less and continue your production, that's ideal, whether it's in new capital investments or in ways that you operate. I also think it's important that you keep in mind that climate change is one way that we have long-term water supply risk, and that's kind of a driver for drought. But it's not the only area of uncertainty that we have. As a water district, we're also worried about what might happen from a regulatory standpoint, what might happen from a legislative standpoint that kind of could shift the rules of the game if our water rights system were changed in a significant way. Those just add more uncertainty to our water supply and make it, those are just more challenges that we face. So I would just say the business community should be paying attention to climate change and drought, but they should also be paying attention to what's going on in the water industry that could have long-term consequences for water supply reliability.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much, Mike. And I undoubtedly expect we will be fielding further questions for you from the group we have today. But I'm going to pass the baton over to Anna, who will be introducing our next speaker.
Thanks, Bill. So next we will hear from Steve Ritchie. Steve is the Assistant General Manager of the Water Enterprise at the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. He oversees water system operations and planning from Hetch Hetchy through the regional water system to the city distribution division in the management of lands and natural resources. Welcome to the webinar, Steve. Thanks for being here. So the first question we have for you is, can you describe the SFPU service area, its population, and the areas you serve? You're on mute.
My apologies. Thank you. Yes, we serve water to customers, about 2.7 million customers in the Bay Area. The service area is a large fishhook running down from San Francisco down the peninsula, around through northern Santa Clara County and up and into Hayward. We do it on a retail basis for the city and county of San Francisco and a wholesale basis for the 26 wholesale customers outside of San Francisco. That they represent about 2/3 of the use, and of course they pay for about 2/3 of the cost of operating and maintaining the system outside of San Francisco.
Thank you, and that's my service area, so thanks for providing us water.
You bet.
And how are your supplies looking so far? What percent full is Hetch Hetchy, and how much is left in the Don Pedro water bank?
Well, those numbers meant something up until August 20th, and now their meaning changes a little bit. Hetch Hetchy is currently about 70% full, which is not bad for this time of year. The water bank has 360,000 acre feet in it, which is 63% full. But as we move forward and we talk about curtailments that have come in from the state, that has basically made the water bank totally unavailable to us for utilization in any way because of the curtailment of our water rights and the water rights of the irrigation districts downstream in Don Pedro. So despite the major investment we made in a large amount of system storage, the curtailments that the state has proposed to ostensibly protect downstream water right holders puts a severe cramp in how we can operate.
Right, thank you. And so if we were to peer into the future, what does your service area look like if we do have 2 more consecutive dry years, and how do you kind of plan for that?
Yeah, similar to East Bay Mud, we plan for droughts as kind of our bread and butter. We always have to be pessimistic because you never know what the next year is going to bring. Our basically design drought or how we test our system is with the 87 through 92 drought, followed by tacking on 76, 77 after that. So it's an 8.5-year drought sequence that we think is appropriate for our system because it is one where we have very strong water rights in wet years and much less strong water rights in dry years. So dry years are when we have to go to our storage to basically take care of our customer needs. So right now, if we had, I actually just presented the other day to our commission, what happens if we have one more dry year, which is 1977, and it starts to look a little grim at the end of that. 2 years, it'll look more grim. So we have to take some actions to take care of ourselves, and that will be working through how we can deal with the curtailment process.
And can you expand on that just a little bit? Like what type of actions would you need to take after year 2 or year 3?
Well, one action we'll actually be taking potentially is January. I've been telling people that we're following the 15% reduction from 2020 demands that the governor requested voluntarily, and system-wide we're doing about 8% of that. So people are doing a reasonable job of cutting back. But if this fall stays dry, I think we could be also declaring a drought emergency around the 1st of January, and that would be part of how we would deal with the curtailments, because one of the things that the curtailments provide for is requesting an exception based on human health and safety. And so again, having lost access to the water bank for any functional value to us whatsoever puts us in a position of needing to make a request there, where we have to demonstrate that we are using all the alternative supplies that we have and making sure that of course we've moved to a higher level of conservation. In terms of alternative supplies in San Francisco, we are actually should be completing and turning on in late 2022 a recycled water project to irrigate Golden Gate Park and Lincoln Park Golf Course with. That will be good for the parks, but it also frees up the groundwater that is being used to irrigate Golden Gate Park right now. So we will add that to the small amount of groundwater we use in San Francisco, going from about 1 million gallons per day to 4 million gallons per day. Also, we have some wells outside of San Francisco that are designed to be used in a drought, and we would look to starting to bring some of those online as well to augment groundwater again into our system as the one supply we can get to most. Just like East Bay Mud, we're also evaluating a number of other possibilities, but water projects take a lot of time to bring online. So that's something that you can't just start constructing a water project tomorrow and have it around a week from now. Life just doesn't work that way. We will be working with the state on, again, getting a health and safety exception, which would provide for 55 gallons per person per day residential use outside of or in our entire service area, which will be something we could do. We also are operating our reservoirs in a way that allows us to divert some additional water to Hetchy currently and provide the curtailment volume downstream from Cherry Lake, one of our other reservoirs. So that will help us in the short term, especially if we get some precipitation that we can store in Hetchy. And of course, in all this, we have elected to join the San Joaquin Tributaries Authority in filing suit against the State Water Board regarding the regulations they issued for curtailments. Again, because of our senior water rights in our situation and in the Turlock and Modesto irrigation districts, we believe they've overreached and are not really taking into account how our system is designed on the Tuolumne River to take better advantage of it. So I think we have a lot of activities going on trying to make sure that we can extend our supply as much as possible.
Great, and it's great to hear that you have a number of water recycling projects in the works, so that by the time they need to come online, they're ready. So the last question I have for you, is there any message you believe is particularly important for businesses in your service area to know?
Yeah, I would echo what Mike said. One, conservation is always the best thing you can do, and people should be looking at replacing inefficient water fixtures, fixing water leaks, things of that nature. Also, landscaping. I think we learned in the last drought. I think everybody consistently believes we should work hard to keep our trees alive, but lawns, things like that, you know, those are going to become something of history, unless you've got recycled water to irrigate them with. And also, as Mike said, worrying about the political picture here and the regulatory one is very important. You know, San Francisco invested billions of dollars in its system. It did not use state and federal funds for that. And when the state talks about the state water system, it's not a single state water system. The San Francisco system and the East Bay mud system are both pretty separate from the State Water Project and Central Valley Project systems. So we shouldn't all be treated equally the same way there because of how the systems were developed and the basis for those things. So I think anything that could adversely affect our water rights is something we would take very seriously and look for support on that.
Yes, and we look forward to supporting you in those efforts. So thank you, Steve. We will have more questions for you at the end of the hour, but right now I will turn it back to Bill.
Okay, thank you, Anna, and thank you, Steve. So now we're going to hear from Lucinda Shih from the Contra Costa Water District. Lucinda has worked with the district for over 16 years. She currently serves as the Water Resources Manager, where she focuses on regional and statewide water quality and water supply issues. Thank you for joining us, Lucinda. And sticking with our general approach here, why don't we start with, now we're moving from San Francisco back across the bay. And could you tell us a little bit about your service area and the population that you serve?
Yeah, sure, Bill. So Contra Costa Water District serves about 500,000 people in northern and eastern Contra Costa County. So basically the part of Contra Costa County that East Bay mud doesn't quite cover. So as far east, out east as parts of Brentwood, all the way over to Martinez and that area, and then south to Walnut Creek, Clayton, that area. So one thing that does make us a little bit different is that about a third of our water sold by volume is actually to industrial customers, the oil refineries and the chemical industries along over there in eastern Contra Costa County over here. So yeah, that means that even though we can ask for, when people talk about conservation, you know, asking those businesses to conserve it's an economic hit, right? So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, no, those are undoubtedly tense discussions at times. And obviously the $6 million question, how are your supplies looking right now?
So right now we are a federal contractors. We have a contract with the Central Valley Project, and that our contract has a policy that they will meet public health and safety. So that right there, we depend on that. So we are okay this year because we have our public health and safety, and also we have secured local supplies through a long-term agreement with a neighboring irrigation district. So that gives us a little bit extra water, and also, of course, storage in Las Vaqueras Reservoir, which is performing as designed and as planned for. We built that in the 90s, and then we expanded it in 2012 to its current capacity. And so our current storage in Las Vaqueras is, we're about 66, but we're about two-thirds full right now. And we are depending on that for both water quality and water supply. And as a matter of fact, because we've made these investments, we have been able to even use some of that capacity in Las Vaqueras, the existing Las Vaqueras Reservoir this year, just to help out some of our neighbors, East Bay Mud and Valley Water, and a couple of the south of Delta agricultural partners down in the Central Valley.
Great. Well, I'm going to jump right then into that since you mentioned it. Can you tell us, we know that the voters approved funding to expand Los Vaqueros. How is that going? And you know, when should we expect to see the fruits of that labor?
Yeah, as you know, the Prop Proposition 1 bond funding that was passed back in 2014 was for the state to invest in water storage projects across the state. And after a fairly rigorous application process, the California Water Commission conditionally awarded us $470 million to fund the public benefits of Las Vegas expansion. And we are working with our local agency partners, including SFPUC, East Bay Mud, and Valley Water, to form a JPA next month. We're on schedule to do that next month. And that puts us on schedule to have our final award hearing with the California Water Commission in summer 2022, with the construction of the first elements of the project starting soon thereafter. So hopefully soon.
Okay, all right. Well, we will be waiting with bated breath. And the hard question that we've already posed to our last two speakers, what if these types of conditions continue for the next few years? Looking into your crystal ball, what do you see for your service area?
Yeah, just like Mike and Steve mentioned, this is what we plan for. Plan for the worst, hope for the best, right? So we will have to tighten our belts, but we should be okay. This is what we designed and built Las Vegas Reservoir for, and also our customers have historically been very responsive to calls for water conservation. For the last drought in 2014-2015, our customers reduced their use by 34%. And that level of conservation, that level of water use efficiency has persisted. We're still 10-15% below before the drought, pre-drought water use levels. So our water supply portfolio is, which I described at the beginning here, including Las Vegas storage, should be sufficient for us to make it through. If we have 2 more bad years of drought, that should be sufficient to meet our demands. We are working on making sure that we're prepared to capture any water available to us this fall and winter, if and when it rains. It just has to rain a little bit, and then there would be water available. And so we are working with the regulatory agencies and everybody to make sure that those avenues will be open to us.
Okay, great. Well, it's encouraging to hear, and we will hope we won't have 2 more years like this, but
yes,
we'll be doing our rain dances. And now I'm going to open up a subject which I know is a big one, and it's one that we could probably do an entire program on, but we put it in your category for you to address, and that is the sort of historic, constant pursuit of solutions for the Delta. And many people may know that there have been proposals throughout the years, it seems like decades now, for solutions to the use of the Delta as part of our plumbing system for the State Water Project and the Central Valley Project. The most recent iteration was the California Water Fix and the Twin Tunnel proposal. And I was just wondering if you could address, what your district thinks of those types of proposals and what concerns you may have.
For the Water Fix, California Water Fix Twin Tunnels that have morphed into the Delta Conveyance Project, CCW is actually, we're actually neutral on that project. We have a settlement agreement with the state, with DWR, to mitigate for any potential impacts of the tunnels on CCWD, and so we're confident that will protect our interests.
Okay, well, that's a good, safe answer. Staying neutral, I like it. I know a lot of people have different positions on it. Well, and why don't we finish then with the same question we posed to Mike and Steve, which is, if you could send out any message. I know one has a consistent one so far has been conserve, and look for efficiency, but any other messages you want to share with the businesses and customers in your service area?
Yeah, I mean, specifically, again, just echo exactly what Mike and Steve said about conservation being important, not just during a drought, but as a way of life. Continue to use efficiently. And yeah, the specifically, again, to talk about Las Vaqueras expansion, which is, I think that, Mike was assuming that I'd talk about it. So I feel like I should talk a little bit more about it. The community's support for that, which really is leveraging CCWD's existing facilities and also East Bay Mud's existing facilities. We sort of identified in our studies that they're these sort of core facilities that we could leverage to provide regional benefits, not just through the Las Vaqueras Reservoir expansion partnerships, but we're also working together, all of our agencies, the Bay Area agencies, Bay Area regional reliability, that we can do today, that we are actually doing stuff today, to try to help each other out, and just looking for opportunities, synergies. That's a good business word, right? So that sort of support, we're always happy to explore those options. But yeah, and of course we actually have put in a plug for our water conservation folks. If any of their local businesses in our area, we have a lot of programs to help you figure out how to, landscape irrigation or leak detection and things like that. So just, I wish I had the URL at hand, but contact us because we have those services.
Great. Well, thank you, Lucinda. And we've now gone from East Bay to San Francisco, back to East Bay. I think we're now going to go down south to Valley Water and hear from a speaker I've heard from before, and I always find interesting to listen to. And I will hand the baton back to Anna to introduce Gary.
Thanks, Bill. So our last speaker today is Gary Kremen. Gary serves as Vice Chair of Santa Clara Valley Water's District 7, with a background in electrical engineering and advisor to several startup solar, water, energy management, and general sustainability firms. Gary recognizes that clean technology innovation can be used to tackle drought and water management issues affecting Valley Water and the region as a whole. So thank you for joining us, Gary.
Well, thank you all for the invite. I'll jump ahead to our first question, which is, Valley Water service area. We serve the entire Santa Clara Valley, from the largest city, San Jose, all the way to Gilroy in the south. There's a couple cities, Palo Alto, Mountain View, that we do not supply the majority of their water to, but basically 2 million people we supply the water to, including 31% of the usage is business, general business, and another 8% is agriculture that we still have in the Valley of Heart's Delight, as we used to be known as.
And we understand that Valley Water is maybe facing greater challenges than any other major water utility in California right now. So how are your supplies looking?
Yeah, so the combination of our supplies and storage are grim. I'm kind of jealous of the other 3 utilities that have come here. So the challenges we have are, number one, half of our storage is in Anderson Reservoir, which is down for 10 years. It's only storing 3% of its water for a seismic upgrade. We get our water mostly from the state and federal systems, and the upstream reservoirs there are at historic lows, including if you ever go out to San Luis Reservoir on the way to 152. I was out there and I saw some elk grazing in the bottom. There's that little storage, and we're hardly getting any water into our county. On the state side, we're only getting 5% of our allocation. For our agriculture users in the south, we're getting 0. And from the federal project, we're getting a small amount plus some health and safety water. So we're in a pretty grim situation. And if we don't have some good winter, even that probably is not going to help us. It's going to be pretty bad next year.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a bit more. What will it look like in 2 or 3 years with consecutive dry years? What will Valley Water be looking at in terms of water supplies?
Well, we're going to clearly run into a situation even next year that some of our shallow wells, if we don't do anything, will run dry. So we also, while we're primarily wholesaler, we serve about 5,000 well owners directly. And a lot of those are the retailers that actually distribute the water. So we'll be seeing dry wells, which means nothing's coming out of them. And that's going to be really bad for individuals. That's going to be bad for businesses. And it's going to be horrible for the environment.
So with that kind of dark picture painted, what is Valley Water thinking about in terms of drought resilience? Are you looking for other water supplies and other projects?
Sure. So of course, we're doing all of those. Some are short term, like we're all in on conservation. We're really focused ourselves on carrot and sending people to rip out their lawns and give free water inspections and rat on their neighbor. Although, you know, we don't have water police, we're not going to turn you off. But if you go to watersavings.org, you'll see some great stuff. So conservation, but that's not going to be enough to get us out of the situation we're in. Right now we have a really good facility for recycling wastewater because we're too far from the ocean or the bay is too shallow to do desal. So we're doing water recycling in the San Jose area. And we signed a 76-year deal with the city of Palo Alto for their wastewater treatment plant to turn that into both recycled water and drinkable water. That's one thing. We're looking for emergency water supplies, but as we heard earlier, not only is it hard to get them, the price of water is 5 times what it was 2 years ago, but getting them here across the Delta is nearly impossible. It's kind of the states grabbing it all for the environment. So they're not letting us get what we want, what we need. It's not a want. So we're actually worried about health and safety. So we're doing all the above. We're building a new reservoir in Pacheco Pass, like Contra Costa. We applied for some state funding from Proposition 1. We were honored to score #1 above all the other projects, getting a $484 million grant. So we're working on that project. We're also looking at participation in Los Vaqueros. We're not close to making a final decision there. We do actually have mandatory 15% reduction going on to the extent that we can. Our powers are not infinite, just like every other district here. So a lot of carrot. Some retailers are doing sticks, but we're pretty nervous on the situation.
Thank you. My next question, so countries like Israel, Australia, and Spain are creating incentives to attract and develop clusters of water innovation companies within their borders. So as Silicon Valley's water district, what more do you think California could do to ensure that the next generation of water innovators are developed here and not abroad?
So we do a bunch of things at Valley Water. #1, we have a point of contact for new technologies and startups, kind of an onboarding process for them. #2, we've been sponsors, and I've personally been a judge and a mentor for Imagine H2O, which is the leading water technology nonprofit in the United States. Before I got elected to the Water District Board, I was an investor in sustainability and a bunch of water technology firms. It's a tough space to make money in, but it is good to look at places like Australia or Israel, where I did a water tour of their facilities. It's hard to compare apples and, make an apples to apples comparison because there's different legal systems in different countries. Hey, there's different legal systems in different states, but they're doing a lot of things we don't do. And we need to look at that from the legislative point of view.
Right. And my last question for you is the same question that we posed to all of our other panelists. Is there any message you believe is particularly important for businesses in your service area to know?
Sure. So, of course, water efficiency and conservation is key in making both the CapEx and OpEx investments that make that so. I think, though, at the end of the day, it's going to kind of come back to this battle that's been going on in California since the gold rush between the environmental uses of water, business and residential, and agriculture. It's hardly any new water being made. So we got to fight over this pie. So it's about political involvement. Sad but true.
Thank you, Gary. Now I want to open it up to audience Q&A. I see that we have a lot of questions on desalination. So I guess, Steve, let's go to you first. Do you have any plans for development of desalination plants or research?
Actually, we've been working with East Bay Mud, Contra Costa, Valley Water, and others on a brackish water desalination plant that would be on the western edge of the Delta. We've been working on it for many years. It is something that I think folks didn't project the kind of need we're looking at now. And so we think we need to collectively look at that and see if there's a way we can potentially accelerate that. There are questions about how much water we could generate there, but we are definitely all together on that as being a project that is part of the portfolio we've been looking at as a longer term future, but we may want to accelerate work on that project in the near term.
Thank you. Another question we have, maybe for Lucinda, if targets water reductions cannot be reached through outdoor restrictions alone, will regulators consider shutoff periods for commercial use?
Oh, that's, yeah, I remain fairly confident that by targeting landscape, discretionary landscape, unfortunately, right, the lawn to garden concept, we can, like I said, like I mentioned in the last drought, we achieve over 30% conservation without going to anywhere near anything like asking for our businesses or commercial sectors to do shutdowns or anything like that. There's a lot of places where we can tighten up, just doing simple things like not watering your sidewalk, that's win-win for everybody, saves you money and saves water. So that's really where our focus is. I haven't heard anything about even about that sort of reduction.
Well, that's good to know. Bill, do you want to ask a question?
I have a question, and maybe I'll start by posing it to Gary. He mentioned Imagine H2O, and I've participated in that and always found it interesting. And I think you were alluding to the challenges that startup businesses find in terms of how to actually make money doing it. They can find these incredible technologies, but then how to scale it and actually make it economically viable is often one of the challenges. And I guess I was wondering is there sort of this perverse benefit to droughts where the cost and the need for water goes up so much that it does unleash some of these new technologies? And I just would be interested in your thoughts, and also anybody else on the panel.
Sure. I mean, I could give a great example of that. I put the first money in a company called Water Smart Software. I was the first chair. It's a company that had a bill insert. I'm using this as an example that would shame or praise you compared to your neighbors on usage. And in the beginning, things went really well during the 2014, the earlier droughts. But the second the droughts went away, the business models didn't work. And that's kind of one of the problems in water technology, which is the needs seem to be there for a little while, then they go away. And the company was lucky enough to morph into doing engagement for utilities, which we're able to sell that to Vertex One. But there hasn't been tons of success stories in water technology. It's a long sales cycle also. Water managers tend to be the most conservative of, I don't know, any industry almost out there. So the sales cycles are long. They don't like to try new things, and it really gets in the way of technology adoption.
Yeah, and I thought that's an interesting answer, and it's sort of unfortunate. You kind of wonder, how do we continue to promote these new technologies? And that maybe piggybacks on what another question that I saw in the sidebar here, which is if any of you can rank the sort of conservation opportunities. I think as we all sit here in our homes or our offices and we say, okay, well, we could not turn on the water as long when we're brushing our teeth or what have you. There's that. But do you have in the back of your minds the sort of prioritization of conservation? Are there certain things that you say, gosh, if we could get all customers doing this, that's a substantial amount, as opposed to other things which maybe it's low-hanging fruit, and we all know every drop counts. But I think people are probably interested in, well, if we got everybody in the Bay Area doing X, Y, and Z, that would really move the needle. And interested in anybody's thoughts on that. Maybe Mike, I'll throw it to you.
I'll start. Yeah, I think top of my mind is find and fix leaks in residential as well as commercial businesses. Anywhere that we can identify leaks is water that's saved and money that's saved. And you'd be surprised how much a leaky toilet can use, how much water a leaky toilet can use. So find and fix leaks. Secondly, efficient outdoor irrigation use. Most of our irrigation use is not producing a significant economic value. Some of it is, but not a lot of it is. Some of it is useful for public access purposes and has value there. But overall, let's use our outdoor water very efficiently and very carefully. So that would be number two. Most of the appliance improvements have been made. Most of that has already been accomplished. The markets have been saturated with respect to low flow devices and water efficient appliances. So there's not a lot left to be done there. There's a little bit. You can always get from 90% saturation up, try to get to 100, but there's not a ton of opportunity there. So those are some that come to mind at the top of the list. We get a lot of questions about things like gray water use or cisterns or things like that. And our analysis is that typically there are larger scale programs that are more efficient and actually achieve more water conservation for a water agency such as us. However, there are customers that are passionate about being as efficient as possible. And we absolutely support people that want to advance their own system, for whether it's rainwater capture or gray water use, et cetera. People just that have that passion about those things, we want to encourage that. It may not be efficient from a financial standpoint for us to invest in, but it's something we still want to encourage for our customers that want to do it.
Okay, Steve, I see you raising your hand.
Yeah, and I'd throw in there definitely, as we mentioned, fixtures, replacing old fixtures is you're always guaranteed results there. Take shorter showers. In the kitchen, use a bucket for anything you wash. What we have in San Francisco are what we call automated water meters, which instead of being read once every 2 months, they're read hourly. And so we have a leak alert program that we had been doing for residential purposes, but now we're expanding it to commercial accounts as well, where if we see continuous usage going on, even when nobody's there, we will send out a notification that looks like you have a leak, and so you should hire a plumber and get something done about it. So we're very active in that area and in other conservation areas. And I guess the last thing, in the last drought, I was interviewed for an article, I think it was in the San Francisco Business Times, and the headline was "Kill Your Lawn." And I think I would still stand by that. Lawns in parks are okay, but large ornamental lawns are not a California thing.
And Gary, yeah, I know you had your hand raised.
Yeah, so for those that have lawns and they get rid of lawns, for those that want to keep their lawns, is going to be very politically difficult. We could sit here and say it's going to happen. Is to talk to the gardeners. 28% of all water, or at least in Santa Clara County, is used outdoor. And in many people's cases, the gardener may know where the leak is, and they might think that overwatering is good and they won't be fired if things get brown. So an actual discussion with your gardeners about look for irrigation leaks, and also to do something about brown lawns are okay. That's one thing. And second thing I think would move the needle is change the way utilities bill. It's kind of an unfair situation that we're asking people to conserve mandatory 15% when they've been conserving already. I think we need to look at things like budgets for households based on the amount of people that is there and how old their house is. I think we really need to think out of the box here, because there is a lot of the low-hanging fruit that's been done already.
Okay, Lucinda, anything you want to add, or?
Oh, no, I was just, Steve covered that when tying into something that Kremen said was the AMI, the automatic meter systems. And there's also things that the customers and strap on to put on their own meters to give that real-time thing. That's an example of technology if we can adopt as an industry, we're moving towards adopting that technology that will help with people's, being able to, responsible people who care and they're worried about their budget and also conserving water. That's a technology that wasn't really feasible, that 70s drought, but it is now. So that's something to look forward in the future, near future.
Yeah, and it kind of segues into one other question that I have, and I think it covers a few that we've received here in the sidebar. And that is, more at sort of this, 60,000 foot level as resource managers. It strikes me you have sort of the carrot option, and you have the stick option, and maybe somewhere in between you also have the market or economic option. Again, to this idea that maybe in billing, there are ways to incentivize and modify customer behavior. And I guess I was curious if you have any preferences along that spectrum. It's almost dangerous to bring it into an analogy of the sort of vaccine mandates, but I'm sure a lot of people are sitting there wondering, well, why don't the districts just say, gosh darn it, everybody has to reduce by 15%, or maybe you're going to get some big penalty. Alternatively, maybe you create some sort of voluntary competition or incentive to modify behavior. And I guess I'd be interested in people's reactions to sort of where they think their districts fall on the spectrum, and if they're willing to touch that third rail of mandatory restrictions, and what kind of pushes you over the edge to go that far.
If I may add, we actually are doing mandatory 15% mandatory restriction right now.
Yes. Maybe you could tell us how you got there.
Well, how we got there is our situation's grim. Okay, what we're doing about it is, well, as a wholesaler, we're giving the retailers, we're saying you got to cut down 15%, but we're not going to mandate how you do it. If you want to do the carrot approach, that's up to you. If you want to do a stick approach, that's up to you. If you want to combine them, that's your choice, because every situation's different, and every utility has a different, let's say, for example, balance of folks that are at home versus folks that come in to commute. So we allow them to do it the way they are, but they got to go do it.
Yeah, I think for San Francisco, we've been in a voluntary mode. We may very well move to a mandatory road, similar to what Gary talked about relative to our wholesale customers. One big challenge we have in San Francisco is the number of businesses that were closed throughout the pandemic and may start to reopen. So I think we're going to have to be very thoughtful about how we look for water use reductions from people who basically didn't use any water in the last year already. So that's going to be a challenge that we're going to have to confront in cooperation with our business customers who, again, were basically shut down for an extended period of time.
Okay, well, Anna, any further questions? I know we're coming right up on the hour here, so.
Yeah, I think we're just at about time, but I want to thank all of our panelists today for joining us. Mike, Steve, Lucinda, and Gary, thank you so much for taking time out of your morning to speak with us. Bill and Venable, thank you for co-moderating the first webinar in this water-related series. It's been a really interesting conversation, and I know the Bay Area Council and our team, we look forward to working with all of you to keep tackling this issue of drought resilience in the Bay Area and California. So if anyone has any kind of closing remarks, now would be the time. And if not, thank you everyone for tuning in this morning, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.